kind of hard to believe, but it's already been 4 years since the iPad 9th generation came out, and I bet there's still a lot of people using it, but is it still worth it in 2025? Well, let's talk about it. Normal price for the iPad 9 was around $329, but I've seen it as low as $200 here recently, so actually a really good price. Of course, it's going to be a little harder to find this brand new in 2025. One downside to this iPad is it only starts with 64 gigabytes of storage. At least there's also a 256 gigabyte version as well. Screen size is 10.2 inch with 1620 by 2160 resolution. I think it still looks pretty good in my opinion, considering the price. Of course, you have the larger bezels on the top and bottom, but that does make it a little easier to hold. I still prefer the fingerprint scanner or the Touch ID with the home button right on the front. I just think it's a little more convenient than having it on the power button. Now, I would say a downside is you don't get a fully laminated display on here, but that's also the case with the iPad 10 and 11 as well. It does have 500 nits, which I think is plenty bright enough to watch movies, play games, just browsing online. I think it's actually pretty comparable to the new iPad 11 that just came out. Now, when it comes to battery life, this one lasted about 5.5 hours in my typical battery drain test at 100% screen brightness, so very similar to most other iPads that I've tested. It should last a couple days with mixed use, even longer if you trim the screen brightness down. I think the battery life is going to be good enough for most people. The one downside with charging is it's pretty slow compared to the new Samsung tablets, which have up to 45 watt fast charging. The nice thing about this older iPad is it's been updated to the latest iPadOS 18, so it's going to be very similar to the new iPad 10 and 11. Typically with iPads, you get about 5 years of software updates, so it still has some life left to it as far as software updates. It's always nice to have AirDrop to copy files from your iPad over to a Mac. You can also customize things a little bit more now, but overall it's going to feel very similar to most other iPads that have come out within the last few years. You can also use the first gen Apple Pencil, which is always nice for drawing, taking notes, or just moving around the software. It's not quite as easy to charge the pencil compared to some of the newer iPads, but still a nice option to have, especially considering this is an entry-level tablet. Now, performance-wise, sure, this is going to be a little less than the newer iPad 10 and 11th generation. I think it's still powerful enough for most people to do some multitasking, or if you're going to be streaming movies, TV shows, just browsing online. You could also play games like PUBG Mobile or Asphalt Legends Unite without too much trouble on here. If you're going to play more intense games, obviously you'll want the newer or more high-end iPads, but overall still not bad as far as performance goes, especially when you compare this to some of the Android tablets at this price. The speakers on the iPad 9 are just there at the bottom, and they're really not loud enough, especially if you're traveling with this. But the nice thing is, it's still got a headphone jack, which you don't see on any new iPads now. But here's a quick sample just to give you an idea of how it compares to the new iPad 11. Now, when it comes to cameras, this won't be the best one out there, but you've got an 8 megapixel on the back, 12 megapixel ultra wide on the front. It should be fine for Zoom meetings, FaceTime, other video conference calls, as long as you have good lighting. Keep in mind, it only shoots up to 1080p resolution for video recording, so definitely not as high resolution as the newer versions. But here's a few quick samples just to give you an idea of what to expect. So is this iPad still worth it in 2025? I would say for most people, more than likely, yes. In fact, I think my mom is still using her iPad Air 2, which came out over 10 years ago, but the iPad 9th gen still has some life left on it. And when comparing this to other tablets in this category, I think it still has decent performance and does pretty well in most categories. As long as you don't mind the older style on the front, it may just come down to personal preference. But if you like tablets, phones, and other tech. I've got a lot more stuff that I'm working on, so you'll want to keep an eye out for those upcoming videos. So if you've made it this far into the video, you may want to say thanks by subscribing, and don't forget to give a thumbs up if this video was helpful. This is Brian from Fishbee Productions. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.